Hey, and welcome back to the channel. As you can see on my right side, this is not the Jeep. And for the moment, I don't have a Jeep. And the reason for that is that I want something more off-road worthy than the VJ I had. And this Volvo is more functional for me than the VJ I got, because the main reason that I picked up the VJ was to have something that I could transport my bikes in, something I could go to places where I would want to ride my bike, and it should be a functional vehicle. And down the road, I started to do more off-roading in it because I used to have an XCA before, and I used to drive proper off-road with that, and I started to do the same with my VJ, and I started to damage it. So I traded the VJ for a Volvo XC70. It's a wagon with all-wheel drive. You would probably see this in the channel further on. And if you have suggestions what I should do with this, leave those in the comments. I have some ideas of put some ship tuning in it and increase the horsepower to around 250. And I also have some thoughts about putting some lift kit on it and lift it up a little bit. But perhaps we're starting to go the same road. I could definitely see where that could end. If I put a lift kit in it, I will try this off-road. That will be fun, but it's going to result in damages, and this is not an off-road vehicle. Maybe it could be a nice overlander somehow, but yeah, maybe not. So leave comments below what you want to see me doing with this vehicle. But today I'm going to change the rotor, the disc rotor. That's very easy, but not all of us knows how to do it. So if you have a bad rotor, or you need to take your caliper off, or just clean your brakes, this is the video for you to watch. And when you're done, you know a little bit more about the brake system of your car. So first things first, jack the car up. And if you use a hydraulic, put a jack stand underneath in case of failure of the hydraulic one. Take the wheel off. This is going to be easier if you're turning the wheels outwards, but in order to get the tire off, it's easier if it's faced forward. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to start the vehicle, and then I'm going to turn the steering wheel. And if you have both wheels jacked up, you could just turn it by hand, but I have one wheel down, so therefore I need to start the car. And when you're starting the car, be cautious when you're doing this, so you don't have it in gear or starting to drive or anything like that, because then you have a problem. Now I'm turning the steering wheel a little bit to the left, and that should be enough. Before I untighten the bracket for the caliper, I'm going to push in the piston, and I'm doing that by taking this G-clamp and put it on the brake like this, and then I'm tightening the G-clamp, and this push the piston inside in a little bit. And the reason why I'm doing this is because the new brake rotor is slightly wider than the old one. So if we don't do this, it's going to be tricky to get the caliper back on, and you would end up having to do this anyway later down the road. So that little bit is enough, and you can now see that the caliper are able to move freely, and you have a lot of space in between here to fit the new rotor. Next step now is to remove the bolts that holds the bracket, and that's a 15 millimeters, one in the top and one in the bottom. I start with the one in the top up here. And remember the old rule, lefty loosey, righty tighty. make sure you get this all the way in so you don't destroy it. Here's the bottom one, and if these ones are hard to break off, you might need to put some penetrating oil there, but they should come off pretty easy. Now when I have those two bolts for the bracket breaking off, I remove them completely, and I will hang the whole caliper in the spring with a zip tie. Hold the caliper because it will fall off. And you could rest it on the top meanwhile, like this. And I will take the zip tie and find a way to get it through. I do it here in the bracket, and then I put it on the spring. Here we go. It hangs nicely here, and now I have full access to the rotor. To get the rotor off, you need to release the 10mm screw that are located here, and in most cases it will fall off by itself, and if it doesn't, you could use a sledgehammer and just hammer it off. Be aware, if you're just taking it off and you're going to reuse it, then you should probably not go all out with the hammer. Here's the 10mm, just undo it. Should not be fitted hard. If it's hardly fitted, then you might need to use some penetrating oil. Let's see if the rotor are cooperating with us. It seems like we need to use the sledgehammer. So you should use some air protection because it's pretty loud. But you see, it's starting to come off. Whoa, there's a lot of rust here. And the reason why I'm changing it is because I have a pretty wide groove in it. And on the other side, that groove here is starting to generate heat. So when I put my hand on the wheel after I've been driving it, it was really hot. And I also heard a small sound sometimes. So it was about time to change it. And as you could see, there's a lot of rust on the inside, and the groove is pretty deep. You could probably take this to a shop, or you could take like an angle grinder and grind it down. That would probably make this usable for a little bit more, but I choose to just replace it. It's not so expensive to get new rotors for a Volvo anyway. When you have this off, it's a perfect opportunity to take a wire brush and clean up the areas that is accessible for you now. You can clean up the heat shield as well. And when you're doing this, use a mask because the dust is there's a lot of dust and you don't want to breathe that in. But I do anything for you, so you will hear my voice when I'm working. That's enough. Now I'm going to spray this down with some brake cleaner. Leave the brake cleaner to dry, or use some air pressure to dry it off. And when you're using this, use some sort of face protection because it's easy that stuff will fly up in your head. Just look at the difference between the new and the old one. We have this groove all the way here. And we have a lot of rust inside. I could scrape this up. So it's about time to get a new one. before you put this one on, you need to spray it clean with some brake cleaner as well, because this one comes pre-coated, so they don't rust from factory. And then take the shop rag and make sure that all the coat comes off. Make sure that you do it on both sides. And I'm not going to spray it too much in this area, because it's not a bad idea to keep some of that coat in here. But you don't want the coat where the brake pads hit. It's time to put the new one on, and before I'm doing that, I'm going to put some anti-seize on the hub. I'm using some copper grease, and I'm just putting a light coat on it. Doesn't have to be thick. And now you need to put the rotor back on, and when you're doing this, you need to align the holes on the rotor with the holes on the hub assembly. And I prefer to use this bolt, the wheel stud, when you're putting it on, because it's easier to align. So I'm putting it up, and then I put 2 wheel studs in. And I could just tighten this down, not hard. That's all you need to do it. And now you could take the 10mm screw that holds the disc brake in place and find a hole for that, and you could just get that one in and tighten that one down. Tighten the 10mm container screw on. This doesn't have to be hard. It only holds the rotor in place while you're having the tires off. And now you could remove the studs. You made it this far, and that's basically all there is to it. The rotor is back on, and the only thing you need to do now is the opposite of what you did when you took it off. So you put the caliper back on by adding the 2 screws on the bracket. I would recommend you to put some Loctite on it. I will put some blue Loctite on it, and then screw it back on. I will start though by cutting it loose and put one of the bracket screws in by hand, because that will hold it in place, and then I could work easily by putting the Loctite on and stuff like that. And since we clamped down the caliper when we started, it should fit right on. And now I have that screw in just enough to hold it in place. We're going to put the bottom one in. Goes in here, and I start by putting the Loctite on the thread like that. And get it in by hand. Then I just tighten it down. I'm not going to do it too hard now. That's it. Get the top one off and do the same on that. And I want to start this a little bit by hand to make sure that it threads correctly. Now I'm going to use the impact just because it's quicker. Then I take my breaker bar and give it the last part by hand. That's it. Now make sure that your caliper moves freely. Before you start using your vehicle, you should pump down the brake and push the brake all the way in the bottom a couple of times. That will push the piston back out into the right position where it should be, and make sure that you spin the wheel around and see that it moves freely and that there's no resistance. Take your car for a test drive and test your brakes. That's it. That's all there is to it when it comes to the brake rotor. And now you just need to put the tire back on, torque it down to spec. I think it's around 160 Newton meters on the Volvos, but check that in your manual so you get it right. And if you like this kind of content and you haven't been checking out the channel before, I'm glad that you're watching, and I would appreciate if you subscribe to my channel by clicking like down below on the subscribe. And also let me know what you want to see on the channel and what you want me to do with this Volvo. And also keep in mind, I'm in no way a professional. I'm just enjoying doing this kind of films, and I'm doing this kind of content in order to learn myself. I do some research. Sometimes I do some errors, and quite often people around me that sees it, comment it, and I learn stuff. But in most cases, the things I'm doing here, it's kind of accurate, and it tells something about how to do it, and it will give you the possibility to do stops yourself. But I always recommend you to do your own research, and you could consider this kind of videos to be a part of that research, but do your own research so you know what you're dealing with, and don't be afraid of doing it, because it's not that hard. So if you like what you see and you want to see more, I will do a playlist, especially for the cross country and the Volvo. This playlist is available here. And if you want to see other content, I would recommend you to check out my channel in general, because there's a lot of content. It's not only about Volvos, it's not only about Jeeps. Sometimes it's mountain biking, sometimes I just want to do a film and I will share it with you. It's, anything. So let me know what you want to see, and perhaps I will do that kind of content. So once more, the Volvo playlist, and click here to subscribe, and thanks for watching.